Yeah? Let's start off easy. What are some lessons you've learned about friendship? Who would like to go first? Or who has an answer?
I can say something.
Okay, amazing. Thank you.
I think a big lesson that I've learned is you get out of a friendship what you put into a friendship. Um, yeah, and it's as simple as that. Like, if you give intentionality, if you give kindness, if you give compassion, you'll get those things back. And the opposite is true too.
Yeah, it's good.
I think I'd have to say that friends will come and go, no matter where you are. As you look back, it's kind of crazy to think about where you've met some of your current friends, or friends that you lost that you had no control over.
I would just say that like friends can be some of the most monumental people in your life, and just like treasure their wisdom and their words and like how you act around them.
Yeah, actually, I also wrote down some thoughts too. And I agree with a lot of what you guys said. I think, like what you said, Daniel, friends are the most monumental people in your life. I think what I've learned about friendship is that it really matters who you hang out with. That the people that you hang out with, they will influence you and shape you into the person that you become. And they can very easily like encourage you towards becoming a better person, or maybe encouraging you towards making some decisions or choices or shaping you in maybe ways that you wouldn't prefer. And actually, Proverbs 27:17 says this: iron sharpens iron, so one person sharpens another. Have any of you heard this verse before? Yeah, a decent amount of us. What this is saying is that if you are friends with people that you want to be like, you are going to be like those people. Yeah. Hey, just a reminder that during this time, we ask you if you feel comfortable, phones under chairs, and then the other thing we ask you, just like a normal message, is that you would just listen, and that if you get distracted, that's okay, but we're going to ask you to stay quiet during this time. So with iron sharpening iron, that's a note to say, hey, if your friends, the people that you put around you, are people that are making good choices, or people that you admire and respect, like you're going to become more like those people. And then kind of the opposite, 1 Corinthians 15:33 says this: don't be fooled by those who say such things, for bad company corrupts good character. And this is kind of maybe hard for some of us to hear sometimes, but the truth is that if we have friends who aren't making the best choices, it doesn't mean that they're bad people. It doesn't mean that they're not worth being friends with. But if it does mean that if we spend a lot of time with those people, if we let those people have a lot of influence in our life, they might lead us in a direction that we don't want to go. And I think some of us think like, no, I am better than that. I'm stronger than that. I know who that I am. Like, it doesn't matter. And that's just not necessarily true. And so I think it matters who you hang out with, just like you said. Emma, I loved that you said it's a give and take, because I think there's been points in my life that I've been really frustrated with a friendship, like, why aren't people reaching out to me? Why aren't people inviting me to things like that? And then I've had to stop and ask myself, like, have I reached out to them? Have I invited them? And sometimes I think we can get a little bit selfish and expect a lot more from other people in our friends than we actually give. And then the other thing is, like literally all the stuff I wrote is what you said, Rob. I think make sure you're taking chances on new friendships, that friendships grow over time, and you can't make new friends in a moment. It breaks my heart, because I've had so many students come up to me and wish that they had different friends or were in a different friend group. And I want to be able to say, like, you can do it tomorrow. And the truth is that making new friends takes time. But one of the best things that we can do is always making sure we're opening up ourselves to new people and new friends, because then if we do get in a situation where, as you said, friends come and go, things change, we're not in a spot where we have to start from zero. So the next question is, what role does faith play in your friendships? Go ahead, Daniel.
I would say it's a big deal. I mean, church is really important for me. God is like so important. And I would say that it plays a role both positively and sometimes negatively. Not saying that faith is a negative thing, but sometimes it's hard for me to get along with my friends who like aren't in faith or don't like care about faith or in other faith, because it's like I get all this happiness and like this is where I put a lot of my time and energy towards my faith, and so it's just really difficult to talk to these people. But at the same time, like all my friends from church and stuff, they're just amazing people, and like their faith helps me build my faith, and like I know that when I'm struggling with something, they can remind me of like who I am and like what God has for me.
So how do you balance, how do you balance having friends who, like you've said, how core it is to have some friends who believe that you believe, and then you've also acknowledged that you have friends that don't. Like, how do you balance those things?
I think growing up and going to private school my whole life, it was, mostly private school my whole life, but it was like everyone was Christian, and so it was just like, that was the norm. But then I also had to realize that it's okay to have friends who aren't Christian, and it's okay to have friends that are Christian. And with my ones I don't, it's just an opportunity for me to talk about faith and like introduce them to God.
Yeah.
But faith doesn't need to be like the only reason we're friends. Like I'm friends with so many other people because I find them fun to hang out with, or they're just fun to be around.
Yeah, I think that's a really like good balance and perspective. Yeah.
I would say it's absolutely okay to be friends with people that aren't Christian. I think the Bible calls us to be fishers of men, and that is really hard to bring somebody to God if they don't know you first. It'd be really hard for your friends to convince you of anything, or a stranger to convince you of anything if you didn't know them whatsoever. I think it's also super, super important to have friends you can go to advice to, friends that would source the advice through the Bible or through their own experiences with God, and be able to give you some really good, really good advice.
Yeah, that's good. Emma, do you have anything to add?
I think super similar. Like, your faith is a platform for all of your friendships, whether they're Christian or not Christian, but the way that you relate with them is going to be different.
Yeah.
So your like core friends, I like, for myself as a strong Christian, I need them to be strong Christians because, like you said, Gabby, like iron sharpens iron, and so if you are surrounding yourself with people who are going to challenge you and to grow in your faith and become more like Jesus, that's going to be the best thing ever for yourself and for them, because you'll do the same to them too. But like Jesus hung out with everybody, and we're called to do that too. And like you were saying, like how are we going to reach people unless we become friends with them and show them the love of Jesus through that friendship?
Yeah, I think that's really practical and sometimes something that we don't talk about a ton, but I think kind of like you, Emma, for my life at least, I've realized that the people that are going to be like my core tightest friends, the people that I'm going to share a lot with, that I'm going to ask for advice with, that I'm going to like seriously make decisions based on, what they're counseling me, like it's really important to me that they share the same values that I do. And so those people that I'm going to kind of share the deepest things I like to have faith, because I want them to lead me closer to God, But then there's all of these other spaces. Like not all of our friends are going to be those super tight core friends, and that's perfectly okay. And so as we move outward, that gives space to have friendships of all different people from all different places, just like Jesus did, right? Like he traveled with this really core group of people who believed what he believed, and then he spent a lot of time hanging out with people who were totally different. And I think sometimes we feel like it's like an all or nothing. Either I have to have friends that are only Christians, or like I can have friends who are not, and then they can have as much influence on my life as they want. I think we really get to choose our friendships and how close they become. And I think there's just wisdom in deciding like who's going to be my good friend, but maybe not my close friend, and who's going to be my close friend, and making sure we leave space for that. I think Colossians 3:12-14 is really good. It says, "Therefore, as God's chosen people, holy and dearly loved, clothe yourselves with compassion, kindness, humility, gentleness, and patience. bear with each other and forgive one another. If any of you has grievance against someone, so like if you get in a conflict with somebody, forgive as the Lord forgave you. And over all of these things, put on love, which holds them all together in perfect unity. And I think when I'm thinking about what role my faith plays in friendships, it's everything that you said, but I think also my faith tells me how I should be treated and how I should treat others in friendship. That sometimes I think, especially kind of in my junior high days, I let myself be treated really poorly by my friends, and I thought it was normal. I thought that's what friends were. And so things like kindness, compassion, humility, gentleness, patience, like those weren't necessarily traits that my friends had, but I just wanted to have friends. And I remember having some tough conversations with my mom where she would watch how some of my friends were treating me and like say, I don't know if those are your friends. And that was super painful to hear in the moment, but I think it was me not realizing that, like, wow, I have value and I'm worth being loved and cared for and treated well. Like, I deserve that as a friend. And then to flip-flop it to say, and that's how I need to be treating other people too. That, like, compassion and kindness and gentleness and patience, like, those are the things that we do as Christians. That's how we treat people. Forgiving, like, friendships, there's gonna be pain, there's gonna be hurt. We need to forgive each other. Like, that's just what we need to do. And then I think the second thing was this is, like, as a Christian, to some extent, I'm called to love everyone, which means I'm called to kind of see everybody as my friend. Maybe not close, but I don't get to not treat people this way because they're not like my friend, right? I'm supposed to see the world around me as people that could be my friend. Moving on, what do we do if we're having struggles with friendship?
You know, I like what you said, we got to treat everybody the same way. Even if somebody's wronged you or somebody does something that you really don't like, it doesn't mean that we get to mistreat them back or mistreat them the same way that they mistreated you. So for people that you feel like wronged you, it's still not right to be wrong to them back. One of the greatest things we could do for somebody is to love them the way Jesus loved them. If somebody is wronging not only you but other people, the greatest way that they would see a change in that would be to lead by an example.
Good.
One other thing that just came to mind that our small group has talked about, I think it was a couple weeks ago, is just the thought, too, of when you're struggling with somebody in a friendship or whatever, just like putting them in your prayers and specifically praying for that person and watching how the Lord transforms that in your heart. And that situation may not change, but the Lord will guide you in it, and the Lord will give you, just putting yourself in their shoes a little bit and giving you a heart for them in a different way that you probably did before.
Yeah, that's good.
I would just say, like, when you go through these struggles, again, like they were all saying, show compassion, show lovingness for this person, because that's what God and that's what Jesus would do for us. I mean, that's what we see him do throughout the Bible. I mean, when he died on the cross for us, obviously, he showed us all the love that he could by taking on the weight of our sins. And I think that we just need to go into that situation and just give with a loving mindset and show a lot of compassion.
So kind of off this, let's say you are having a struggle with a friend. I think the temptation, like you feel hurt, you feel frustrated, maybe what you want to do is gossip with a bunch of people, right? But there's still usually like pain and hard feelings that we want to work through. And so how can we work through those hard feelings without, making the situation worse? Because I think a lot of our first reaction is then, I'm going to tell all of our other friends in the friend group and we're all going to talk about this and things like that. And that might not be the right answer, but I still recognize that when something really hurts us, usually we need to process that somehow. And so how have you or how would you kind of recommend doing that? If you have any thoughts, I'm putting you on the spot.
I'm a really big journaler. So if I need to I'm an external processor, so that means like I kind of need to talk through things with people in order for myself to process it well. But some things are not really appropriate to talk to a bunch of people. So I have a couple of safe people where I can talk to them about anything and everything. And then I have my journal, and it's called, like, I call it a prayer journal, so it's always kind of like in a prayer format to the Lord. And I really process a lot that way. And
Yeah.
that way it's safe. It's between me and the Lord, but I can put it all out there in a really raw format.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think it's super important to not only process what you're feeling and how you were wrong, but also, especially if they're your friend, to make sure they understand that they mistreated you, and make sure that, just that they were being like not how they could have treated you, that they're not treating you how they could have been, because they don't always understand. They don't always know that what they did was wrong, and even if they knew, then maybe that's not somebody you should be investing time into.
I would say if you feel like you can and it's like safe enough, just talk to the person. I mean, it's kind of cliche, but it's easy to talk to someone one-on-one when you can feel more comfortable with them, and then you also can just talk about, hey, this is how I feel. I want to know your side of the story. Because
Yeah.
if you go and gossip with other people, like you were saying, no one's gonna get the true side of like the story. It all gets broken down and twisted into lies and other stuff
Yeah.
through gossip. So
Yeah.
it's just, I personally have found it easier just to talk to the person
Yeah.
one-on-one, and then if it doesn't work out,
Yeah.
maybe that wasn't a person I should have been surrounding myself with anyway.
Yeah. And I think it's okay to have one or two really safe people that you can talk with, but no, like, make sure those are people who won't just affirm you, like, be like, you're right, they are awful, they are the worst. You want people who will, like, support you, but also challenge you to go, like, but have you considered their side? Or, like, how can we work to get this better? Like, because there'll be people you talk to who their only thing they're going to do is just make you feel more right and more angry, and then there'll be people you talk to who will actually, like, help you see that person, like, through Jesus. I really love this verse, Romans 12:18. It says, Romans 12:18. Do we have that one? Maybe not. I'll just read it. It says, if possible, as far as it depends on you, live at peace with everyone. And I really like this verse because it's just a reminder to say this, like, I can control my behavior and I can't control your behavior. So I can control how I respond to people. I can control my interactions and relationships, and I can't control other people's. And so sometimes there's going to be situations that we're going to try our best to get along, have good relationships, and make peace. And sometimes the other person just isn't going to be in a place that they're going to be able to do that. And that's okay. Like, we're just responsible for how we respond. And those things won't last forever, but I think if you were with us last week, we talked about how being kind is more important than being right. And I think the sooner you can get to that place of going, okay, being kind is more important than being right, the better it'll go. This is the last question we're going to talk about, but one I've kind of heard a lot from students. How can we be good friends, particularly in a school environment where kind of negativity and talking bad about people is normal? I've heard from a lot of students of like, hey, I want to be a good friend, I want to encourage people, I want to say nice things, but like at school, everybody talks bad about people. Everybody's negative. Or like, hey, I'm in this friend group and people are talking bad and I don't want to do it, but also like if I'm the one that stands out and kind of stands up to it, then like I might get excluded. I don't want to get kicked out of the group. And I really think that's a really kind of challenging thing. And so, how can we be good friends in an environment that maybe is kind of set up to not do that?
I think if we stood up and spoke out against every single thing that we felt was wrong in our world or in our community, we'd be standing up just about every single day. And that would be really, really hard. I think the best thing that we could do is to lead by example. If others see that you're not talking behind other people's backs, you're not gossiping when everybody else is gossiping, and they're noticing such a positive shift, then they're going to be curious. They're going to go, okay, well, why are they gossiping but you're not gossiping? And that's one of the greatest opportunities to show them or bring them to God.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, Jesus calls us to be countercultural, right? So we're supposed to stand out. And sometimes it's to our culture not in a good way, or they may make fun of us for it, but the Lord praises that. And so, yeah, like, do what you think is right, stand up for yourself, and also, like, if you are kind, if you are happy, if you're encouraging, people are going to flock to you.
Yeah.
So just because everybody around you is acting a certain way doesn't mean you have to do that. And be patient with it, because, like, I think of my friendships, and middle school and high school, like, I ended up not getting the closest friends there. My closest friends came later, but me as a person, I did not change. So I didn't let myself become something else just to gain those friends.
That's good. Yeah.
I think that when you're in a friend group, or I think you need to remember that you can't compromise yourself as a person and like compromise your values just to try to fit in.
Yeah.
Because if that's what you have to do, you shouldn't be with those people and around them.
Yeah.
Even if you feel like, yes, I'm going to be left out, or I'm going to become the next target of gossip, it's so much better than just staying with that group and becoming known and getting a reputation for being that person.
Yeah, yeah. Proverbs 16:28. We saw it just a second ago. It talks about a perverse person stirs up conflict, and gossip separates close friends. And I just think, even though that might be the norm, I think a norm where gossip, where talking behind the people's back, is not an environment where actual good friendships are formed. And just so some of the things that I would just say to someone who's asking this question is, one, like, give yourself grace. You're not going to be perfect. Like, you're not going to get this right all the time. You're going to make some mistakes. You're going to not say something when you wish you did, and that's okay. Like, Jesus doesn't ask us to be perfect, right? He never does. There is a verse that says, be perfect as your heavenly Father is perfect, but we'll talk about that later. But I'm saying there's grace. Like, there's so much grace for us to make mistakes, to not do it right. And I think there's beauty in just saying, like, I'm trying. And then, two, like, remember that you can always apologize or check on your friends after the fact. Like, sometimes, literally 2 days ago, I was upset with Kari and Isaiah, and it wasn't about them, it was about something else. And so I kind of yelled at them for a second, and then I went, oh my gosh, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to do that. And just know that just because you said the bad thing doesn't mean that you can't go back and fix it, doesn't mean that you can't, or just because you didn't speak up in the moment doesn't mean you can't text them later and say, hey, like, I'm sorry about that. Like, there are more opportunities to make things right. And taking really small steps. Maybe all of a sudden transforming into a happy, optimistic, encouraging person overnight is hard, but can you try to say one kind thing a day? Can you take really small steps? And then kind of the last thing I want to say is be willing to take risks and know that not everyone is like that. I think sometimes we use these generalities like everyone talks negative, everyone gossips. And I would challenge that belief a little bit and say, yeah, it might be a lot of people, it might be the majority of people, but it's probably not everyone. And there probably are people in your school who don't treat each other. Like, kind of reverse to you, Emma, I found a lot of my really good friends in high school, and they were people who encouraged me and supported me and didn't talk bad about me. And so just an encouragement to say, it might be rare, but I believe those people are out there, and it might mean that you don't sit at the coolest lunch table or you're not in with the like most popular people, but in the long run, you'll probably like feel a lot better about yourself. You'll probably have better mental health. Like, those things will probably, become the person you want to be. So any last things you guys want to say before we wrap up?
I just really want to reiterate what Emma said about how being nice to people just in general will cause them to flock to you. I mean, it's crazy how not talking behind people's back and just overall showing generosity and compassion is one of the greatest ways to bring people to God and bring people just as close friends. Those are the people that you want in your life.
Yeah. That's good. Can you give it up for our panelists?